Everybody, welcome to our July Cabinet. So first of all, are there any apologies for absence, please? No. Thanks, Alex. Any declarations of interest from any members of Cabinet? No. Okay, let's move on then to questions. And first of all, we have a public question. We've received one public question. The question is from Mr. James Hawkins. So, Mr. Hawkins, would you please like to come forward and ask your question? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Councillor. And may I say things I haven't had the opportunity yet. Very many congratulations on your ascension to the leadership of the Council.
Thank you.
Okay, my question. The Council's ability to communicate with members of the public appears to be under significant strain. At a full Council meeting in March, a motion from Councillors Bogerline and Lubbock stated that of the 8,096 calls made to the Council in December last year, 3,488 didn't manage to get through at all and had to be run back. This would represent a failure rate of 43%, which is staggering. I'm worried that getting the help that residents need is becoming a two-tiered system between the IT literate and those not so. The elderly in particular are disproportionately reliant on traditional methods of communication which appear shunned. The motion points to face-to-face appointments. Personally, I haven't come across anyone who has received a response to a written letter whatsoever. So I asked the Cabinet member how many letters have been received in the past 6 months and how many have had responses.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver, would you like to respond to me?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. And thank you for your question. Yes, we need to be clear here because there may be a misconception about the callback service that we offer and what it is. So when a customer makes a call to us, they can either wait for their call to be answered, or they can choose an option where they can request a call back from the customer service team if that suits them better. So when they request a call back, it means that the caller retains their place in the queue rather than waiting, and then they get a call from us without having to wait in a call queue. I've actually used that service myself. So in December 2022, there were 14,610 calls. 3,488 of those answered calls were those who'd requested the callback option, and the total success rate for answering calls was 79.29%. The calls that were not answered are where a customer has chosen not to wait or request a callback from us, where they decided to choose another contact channel, so they might have gone online afterwards if they're able or got help with that. Their requirements to contact the council may have changed. They chose not to wait or chose not to continue with their inquiry, so a number of possibilities. Traditional methods of communication are available to customers accessing our services, including face-to-face at our customer contact centre and via written communication. The comment in your question that states, I haven't come across anyone who's received a response to a written letter whatsoever feels a little bit misleading, as across the council, numerous written communications are sent each day, whether via letter or email. We'd also obviously describe an email as written communication. And to suggest otherwise feels like it does paint an inaccurate picture. We can't provide the total volume of written letters received and responded to across the whole organisation, but if you would please provide the details of anyone who has not yet received a reply to their written communications, we will investigate it further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. Mr. Hawkins, you're allowed one supplementary question. 1 minute to speak. Do you have one? Okay, 1 minute.
Thank you for the answer, Councillor. I do appreciate the time and effort you've taken in providing it, but I'm sure you can understand why I might not be fully satisfied with the overall content within it. I mean, there is a whole section of society, nominally a rather vulnerable one, for whom written communication is second nature and electronic communication is a struggle. Given the cost of living pressures, we may even see this digitally excluded number grow further. I mean, what does it say to these people that we don't even bother monitoring their contact across the whole organisation? What does it also say about the likely reliability of those responses, given that lack of oversight? And lo and behold, I hear too that Labour councillors voted to delay this issue going to scrutiny committee last month. So what assurances can you give me that you and your party are in any way taking this seriously and are going to address it?
Councillor Oliver.
Sorry, I was there before you. Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the supplementary. So, I suppose off the cuff, what I would say is this has just become part of my portfolio, and digital exclusion is quite a high priority for me personally. Certainly as councillors, we support people when we have casework inquiries, which quite often we get face to face. And so, you know, I think we are well aware that there are people who are excluded, and it's something that we're working on.
Thank you. And thank you for your question, Mr Hawkins. There are 12 questions now from members of the Council to Cabinet members, of which notice has been given in accordance with the provisions of Part 3 of the Constitution. A copy will be available on the Council's website, but members who have asked questions are permitted to put a supplementary question to the Cabinet member. So question 1 was from Councillor Worley, who is not here. So we move on to question 2, which was Councillor Osborne. Councillor Osborne, do you have a supplementary? Well, what a surprise.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Thank you for your response. It's good to see that all parties share the concern about the loss of community assets like the Lakeland Post Office and Adine Post Offices. You refer in your response to work that's being done to keep buildings in use. I want to ask again about the meanwhile use policy that the council will implement. For example, looking at buildings that the council owns and making sure that those can be used in between having permanent tenants. Is that something that the council is looking into?
Absolutely, it's something that we can and will do, and you know, it's part of a range of range of measures that we can take to ensure the city centre remains vibrant, and that we don't have excessive empty units. Although I would again stress we are doing really well by comparison with most other places in the country, and that I think is it's because we have a strategy to protect the city centre economy and to protect the environment of the city centre, which cuts across everything that we do. And you'll know that, you know, our transport policy, for example, and our policy for the city centre for culture, for retail, all of those things, they all interlink. But I think meanwhile spaces are something clearly which are part of that. Okay, so we now move on to question 3, which is Councillor Schnierer, who I was told was going to be here. Yes, he is. Would you like to come forward?
Yeah, thank you very much. Given that by your own admission, there are issues with the sort of cleanliness and the street cleaning in those areas that I specified in my original question, why hasn't the council done more already to rectify these problems, please?
I wouldn't say it was my admission. It was just an answer to a question, an honest answer. Well, I can't speak for the council previously, and I haven't had this portfolio, that portfolio for some years. But I can assure you, it is one of the priorities for this administration going forward.
Thank you very much.
So now, question 4, Councillor Galvin. Yeah, no, you've got to go and sit there.
Thank you. Thank you for the answer. So there is rightly that growing frustration from the public after many decades of abuse of our rivers, and the nutrient neutrality stop on development since March 22 was justified for that, and that has had a huge impact on housing development over the past year, we need to now have at least this equally strong but positive impact on the state of our rivers, including the Wensum. So could you, thank you for the answer of where, the detailed answer, but I'd really like a bit more detail on what the council's support is with timescales for the work that's being done on how actual in-river measures of phosphate can be linked and apportioned to clearly defined and measured upstream point sources. So the natural England target for phosphate is 0.04 milligrams a litre and 0.02 milligrams a litre long-term on rivers like the Wensum. So timescales and actual how you're working with partners to how you can link those measures to the upstream point sources. There's a very clear one on the Wensum.
I agree with you about the way our waterways have been abused over the last period, and we're all extremely concerned by it. And obviously, I've set out the way that working with partners, we're seeking to mitigate the effects of further house building on the emission of nutrients into waterways. So I understand the question you're making. I understand the point. I don't carry the answer in my head, but I'm happy to respond after the meeting. So now we have question 5, which is Councillor Champion.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question, and thank you for a response, Councillor Giles. It is a good response in the context of bureaucracy, a poor response in the context we've just had the hottest year in 100,000 years. I would like to ask if we can be more ambitious. The County Council is going to increase its uncut area by threefold. I would like to highlight that we've had a 65% decline in insects since 2004 in the last 20 years, and that if our biodiversity plan to increase insects by 10% in the next 20 years, in the context of vertebrate loss declining at 2.5% a year, I'm afraid the maths doesn't add up. We are in an ecological emergency, and your response is good in the sense that you've explained what you're doing with the cutting, but I would be interested to find out if we can be more ambitious. Possibly we could have a sit down and a discussion to explore how we could do that.
Thank you, Councillor Champion. Clearly this is something that's going to be considered as part of the biodiversity strategy following the publication of the baseline study. We have got a full-time biodiversity officer being recruited for the environmental strategy team, which will create more resource to engage with councils. What I would say is the evidence isn't totally clear that letting grass grow longer is necessarily better for biodiversity without sowing wild flowers. With long grass, most of the energy goes away from rooting and spreading into seed production. Most lawn grasses grow and spread with the use of specialised roots and stems, helping the lawn repair itself after damage and filling in bare spots. This is often a faster process than spreading from seed, because spreading from seed requires drawing nutrients from the soil, and the more nutrients you withdraw from the soil, the less healthy the soil is for the grass. So there are swings and roundabouts to it, and it all needs to be considered in the round. It's clearly something you need to consider very carefully, but it's not something that we've implemented on mass scale today. There are trials ongoing.
Thank you.
Thank you. So question 6 is Councillor Calvert. Is Councillor Calvert here? Oh, okay. Question 7 is Councillor, oh my word, can I pronounce your name properly? I don't want to offend you. Hoshner. Apologies.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask a question, and thank you for your response, Councillor Stoner. There is no question that in a cost of living crisis, we must ensure that everybody can keep warm, and we agree on that very much. That being said, the growth in wood burners has overwhelmingly been in middle class areas for aesthetic reasons, not by people struggling to heat their homes. Air pollution disproportionately affects people with underlying health conditions who are overrepresented among the poor and vulnerable in society. Will the Council include in its communication that it advises people not to burn wood at all, given the harmful effects of burning any kind of wood, especially on people with underlying health conditions?
I think we can, as we have, encourage people not to use wood burners for all the reasons that you say. And I understand entirely the relationship between toxins and people's health, and particularly those who are less well off. But I would still say that the message has to be that if people have no other alternative, and there will be people who have no other alternative, then we shouldn't be preventing them from keeping themselves warm. And it's a last resort where people have no other alternative, and obviously we would seek to avoid that.
Thank you.
So, question 8. Councillor Catt, do you have a supplementary?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick, for your response, and thank you for allowing us to answer questions that come as well. On your first point, though, Greens on the Constitutional Local Party did actually propose to publish the papers for Cabinet before the deadline for public questions, but Labour councillors on the committee did reject that. So it's kind of unfair to expect that the members of the public can ask questions before the papers are actually published. In the same way, full council meetings are also in the evening. They're much more accessible to members of the public, and that's why we tend to get more public questions there. I would like to remind them as well that full council meetings are kind of the opportunity for all elected members of the council, including councillors in the administration, to scrutinise the work of the council and affect council's policy, which is what we are actually here to do. We have no meetings in August, October or December. We can't ask questions or bring motions at the AGM or Budget Council, and that leaves us 3 opportunities to do so between the election and the new year, in which we can actually raise the issues that matter to our residents. Very rightly as well, all opposition parties at North County Council harshly criticised the Conservative administration for the exact same reason we've now decided to cancel the July meeting. Why did you choose to make the exact same decision, especially when you know the business of the year?
Councillor Catt, I think you have a minute for a supplementary. I think you've used that and more.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Paul.
you very much. First of all, it wasn't myself who made that decision, it was actually Lord Mary, who Paul was not a member of this Labour administration. And I don't think that the people of Norwich will be very pleased to see money wasted basically on just a non-event where there were no reports and where just people could just grandstand. At the end of the day, yes, it is formal business, it should be discussed. As the Lord Mayor decided, it was not formal business to discuss, and therefore the meeting was cancelled. It's not the first time by any means that a council meeting has been cancelled due to lack of business.
Thank you, Councillor Catt. Question 9, Councillor Fox. Councillor Fox is not here.
Yes, and anyone else, that's it.
Oh, no one else. Okay, that's it. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your questions. So let's move on to the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 14th of June. Can we accept these as a correct record, please?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. Let's move on now to the Q4 assurance report, which I'm going to introduce, and other Cabinet members will join in with comments on their specific areas. So the report shows how performance overall is consistent with the previous quarter. That was Q3 2022-23. However, it's dropped in some areas compared with Q4 of 21-22, with a number of indicators moving from amber to red. We continue to outperform in the following areas. IT system availability as a percentage of time available in core hours. That's 99.95% achieved versus a target of 99%. The number of homeless households living in temporary accommodation, that's 46 achieved versus a target of 62. The percentage of households owed a homelessness prevention duty, that's 88% achieved versus a target of 66%. Other areas where we're performing well are the percentage of customers responding as satisfied with the customer contact team service, that's 84% against a target of 76%. The number of days taken to process new housing benefit applications, that's 18 days achieved versus a target of 21. The number of planning decisions upheld after appeal, that's 88% achieved versus a target of 66%. The number of food premises rated 0, 1 or 2 moving to a compliant rating of 3, 4 or 5 on the Schools on the Door scheme, 93% achieved versus a target of 80%. Council income from investment property portfolio expressed as a percentage of target, that's 97% achieved versus a target of 95%. And the percentage of FOI requests responded to within statutory timeframes, that's 91% against a target of 90%. We've also seen a positive direction of travel in comparison to quarter 3 in complaints requested responded to within stated timescales. This indicator remains red, but has seen a positive direction of travel, improving overall to 66% from 58% in quarter 3. Secondly, council tax collection, this has moved from amber, that's 99%, to green, that's 100%. And business rates collection has moved from amber, 99.53%, to green, 101.83%. Areas where we are below target and are taking steps to improve performance include the average relet time of council homes in calendar days. We've been working with NCSL to increase capacity, which we anticipate will result in a reduction in the time units are empty throughout the current financial year. Secondly, the number of private sector insulation measures completed for the quarter was 34. However, there have since been more than 120 assessments carried out and or payments made, which will translate into completed installations in the next 2 reporting periods. The nature of the funding landscape for this area of work produces peaky quarterly KPI outcomes, but overall we will see an annual increase in measures being completed. The percentage of people, thirdly, the percentage of people responding as feeling safe in a local area survey continues to be low, with only 93, that's 4% of responses being received, resulting in the data being statistically insignificant. Ways in which we can increase response rates to the survey are being explored in the short term, and other ways to measure people's feeling of safety will also be considered as part of the performance framework refresh for 24-25. Also, work is now underway to form a Safer Norwich partnership, which will seek to address the reasons why people feel unsafe in their neighbourhood. I'm going to leave it there with that overview. I'll invite any Cabinet members who wish to comment on their specific areas to do so, and then we can take questions. So first of all, Paul.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you first of all for drawing attention to the Treasury management performance. Due to the proactive management of the Council's cash flow and not putting into long-term deals, the Treasury management team were able to optimise investment returns in a rising interest environment, generating £3.8 million in investment income in the financial year 2022-23. At the same time, the Council is in a position to let 2 large loans mature without having to repay anything, causing our debt to reduce by £51 million. I think I must pay great deal of praise to the hard work and attention of our Treasury management team. On election action communications, a bit of a plug for the Scrutiny Committee, in which we meet with many times. It's obviously a very serious issue, and the Scrutiny Committee will be discussing it then, and I'm very much looking forward to attending that meeting. We do have the case study on the budget process, but I will be late introducing the finance planning item later on in this agenda. I shan't actually go into any great detail, but I think it's very well worth people actually reading this particular paper. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. Do any other Cabinet members want to add anything about Councillor Jones?
I suppose just whilst Roy touched on the voids, whilst the number can look challenging, I actually see it as a success that we're getting to those sort of longer term ones, and actually the progress being made within that service by officers is fantastic, actually steps forward. The other thing I'd like to highlight really is the private sector homes made safe. I think whilst it's not quite where I'd want it to be, one thing to note is we end up being caught up with very large projects where often we've had a number of them where it's involved office conversions and similar. And I think we feel the knock-on effect of this government reduction of red tape, as they'd call it, and things that they saw as an inconvenience. But actually then we're having to pick up the consequence of that, where it's meaning people end up living in unsafe properties where we've then got to intervene, and they become very large, complex projects. And saying that, we will then, actually, when those are resolved, we're looking at significant numbers of homes made safe through that. So it's, again, peaks and troughs, but I think it's important to look at the context of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Are there any other? No. Any questions? Councillor Giles?
Thank you. I wasn't planning to speak, but as I've just obviously it's good to see that HB application processing time was within the KPI target, and year to date they've been lower than they were last year as well. So successes, council tax support fund being invested to top up CTR applicants' eligibility, and the completion of the housing benefit award accuracy forecast reviews.
Thank you, Councillor Giles. Okay, Councillor Galvin, do you have a question, please?
Yes, thank you, I do. There's obviously a lot of things on here, and it's a really interesting report, so thank you for it to officers. Just to ask about the private sector housing team, which it says that Commission to continue to address backlogs in HMOs, inspections and work on significant enforcement work. So this is diverted officer time, but it's of paramount importance to ensuring significant housing in the city is safe for residents. It's resulted in the overall number of properties being made safe being recorded at 26, as against the target of 50, so just over half. The team continues to work proactively and to the best of their ability whilst managing competing demands and complex caseload. That's understood. And it also says damp and mould in the private rented sector. The housing team continues to face multiple challenges, as you say, because of government requests for detail on the team on that has diverted officers and delayed business as usual work. So getting to the question, I think all of that makes it very clear the team is under-resourced. Quite apart from the fact that damp and mould should be part of business as usual work. So should there not be enough resources made available to do enforcement and the day-to-day work, given that as Cabinet member you pledged that this is a priority, how can it be either or? And can you assure me that those resources will be put in place for that important work to happen?
Councillor Jones.
Yes. There is work in progress around advertising roles within that team. There's advertising for new team leader. I'm not quite sure. There's various. We got delayed on the restructure for various reasons, and that does include extra capacity. I would say in terms of us also with homes made safe, alongside that we've had the HMO inspections going on, which actually, yes, that's inspections and that's also making stuff safe, but it sits separately in terms of licensing. So I think the numbers, I have to say, the way we measure them, I don't totally agree with. So there's a broader question there. But yes, in terms of we need to be looking at, and we are going to be, as we get fines and things from landlords, those have to be reinvested back into the service. But also it's about actually our corporate priorities, and that is something that we are very keen to expand. But we also need to look at where we find those staff from. It's a very niche sector and very difficult to recruit in, and we find that repeatedly. There are very few environmental health officers available, and that's why we've looked at growing our own, and we have had, correct me if I'm wrong, Graham, an apprentice in the team who is making massive strides and doing wonderful work. and I would be very keen for us to have more of that. So we are being creative because it is. I'd love to have more staff, but finding them is going to be a challenge in that. But it is something we're committed to, expanding that team.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, the recommendation is that Cabinet note progress on the key performance indicators for this quarter and the corporate risk register. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. So we now move on to item 6. This is antisocial behaviour, and this is Councillor Jones.
Thank you. So this is the introduction of the PSPA, which has had various bits of coverage. So we have had issues with congregation of vehicles in a number of areas of the city for many years, causing noise, antisocial behaviour and, to be frank, significant safety concerns. And this was most recently demonstrated publicly at Britannia Road. And I want to thank the Crome residents who brought this concern to a council meeting previously. And I'm really pleased that with the work that's been done by Chris and Tim and others, that we now have this very robust solution. And the introduction of PSPO is not something we're taking lightly, but there's good evidence of these used elsewhere in the county, most notably the seafront in Yarmouth. But unlike Yarmouth, the issue of drivers who think that it's entertaining to congregate doing wheel spins, stunts, playing excessively loud music and generally disrupting lives of residents is a wider concern than just Britannia Road, but also areas that came up in the consultation included Hall Road, Eaton Park, amongst others. But fundamentally, our residents have the right to live free from the intimidation and social behaviour that too frequently accompanies these gatherings. The persistent and repetitive nature of the gatherings has had a significant impact on the communities that we cannot ignore. So whilst Norfolk Police have been using their own powers to try and curb this, the introduction of the PSPA by this council is an additional tool that we're happy to be able to provide in tackling this. But I'm pleased this will be in the context of a more county-wide cooperation approach to look at this issue more broadly. And whilst we have some specific areas highlighted that could be an issue, having a PSPA that was too geographically narrow would only serve to shift the problem elsewhere in the city, displacing these gatherings and disrupting the lives of even more citizens. I'd like to highlight the positive partnership working with the police, both in understanding the issue and drafting the PSPA to maximise its effectiveness and ensuring it's something they'll be able to enforce. So this will enable the police to take a robust approach against people who are gatherings of vehicles that are causing disruption in public places across the city, and I really hope that my colleagues can support this citywide approach and minimise the impact of this on communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. It's really important for communities across the city who've been blighted by this problem. Any Cabinet colleagues wish to comment? Councillor Giles.
Thank you, and obviously Councillor Jones quite rightly says it's a citywide initiative. As a Cronial council, as the Cabinet member from Household Heath, I'm certainly particularly pleased to see this come about. Thank Councillor Jones. I also want to thank Tim for his dog with a bone, Tim, for 3 years. So I apologise for any persistent emails. Thank you for all the fantastic hard work in making this happen. It's really appreciated by the residents in that area in particular. I did want to ask Councillor Jones to set out in more detail in relation to what responses we got to the consultation of residents.
I think from memory we've got over 150 responses to this, and I think it showed quite how it is a citywide problem. People were flagging up different areas of the city. It wasn't just Britannia Road, and that's why it was so important that we looked at this on a citywide basis. If we'd just done Britannia Road as had been originally suggested, we would just be shifting the problem elsewhere and creating another problem to deal with and disrupting more people's lives. Hopefully this whole city approach, we can actually mean that this isn't an issue and this is something police can take strong action on, and it's, let's say this isn't acceptable in Norwich.
Absolutely, thank you, Councillor Jones. Any other questions or comments from Cabinet members? No? So, Lucy, you've got a question.
Yes, thank you very much for the report, and it's a really welcome example of where residents, council and police have worked together to get a solution, and there's an household committee member who raised it at the committee, and then we had a really good meeting on the briefing. I saw how I would really particularly highlight the work of Tim to address this, because it was by no means easy. It was so many different interests and people and feelings were running high, so it was a difficult one to unpick. So it's a really welcome example of everyone working together. There's a similar issue where we're all on the same side, but the council hasn't really made as much progress as CCTV. And could this approach be taken to that issue, where the police and council, etc., could work together to get a solution to communities who need CCTV for safety measures, but over several years have had limited results in getting council help at this kind of scale?
Councillor Jones.
We do have TV resource available, that gets put where there's an identified need. I think if you've got specific areas that are looking for that, I'm very keen to have a discussion of areas that are particularly highlighted, so feel free to feed that into us. But it's something we have been looking at expanding, looking at new cameras and options, and it's something that the technology is developing all the time, but we also have to look at it in the context of how it's used, and we now have some very clear policies around that and work being done around understanding it's the wider context that CCTV exists in, so we have to look at it at that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Giles.
I did just want to add, and I appreciate your question is a much broader one, Councillor Gelfand, that for the last few months there has been CCTV covering the Britannia Road, so combined with this, it sends a strong message to all places that this nonsense won't be tolerated any longer, because if it wasn't tolerated, there would have consequences for residents.
Thank you, Councillor Giles. Okay, so the recommendation is on page 47. 2 recommendations. All those in favour? Thank you. And thank you to the officers as well. Excellent piece of work.
Thank you.
Okay, so we move on now to whole house improvements to void properties. It's the Beth Jones show tonight, isn't it?
I'm starting to understand how Gail felt.
So we're on to page 67.
Thank you. So this report is rating to propose award of a contract for whole house improvements of up to 40 void properties. The recommended course of action is to award this contract to Gasway Services Limited at a cost of £625,000 for a period of 1 year from September 1st 2023 to August 31st 2024, subject to satisfactory performance and quality. This will allow us as a council to bring large-scale, complex voids properties up to a lettable standard. Whilst this is a recurring requirement, the proposed award is an interim arrangement for a year to allow for future procurement based on ongoing surveys and restructuring of the property services team. The contract includes kitchen and bathroom upgrades, electrical rewiring, heating upgrades, doors and window replacements, plastering, damp works, general repairs and garden clearances. Pretty far-reaching. We'll be looking to include environmental improvements as required with the activities above. The maximum value of the contract, as I said, is £625,000. It's already accounted for in the approved HRA business plan from December of last year. Based on these considerations, so I'd like to recommend that we award this contract to Gasway. So they meet our requirements both in terms of expertise and cost. And I would say we'll be closely monitoring their performance in this to ensure we maintain a high standard of service. I think it's important to look at this in the context of, we're looking at some complex voids, and it's really important to get those back into use. And that's where we're looking at these high relet timescales for relet. Is actually when the properties are more complex. So taking this whole house approach with them will allow us to get those sorted and moving forward. I'm sure Brian's got anything additional to add.
Brian.
One of the things I would say is that, and to the point, is an interim arrangement while we carry out procurement of the whole house approach and carry out the restructuring. So I think it's also worth noting that one of the things that we're looking to do is make environmental improvement BAU it's not separate, it's something you should be doing as a narrative. We are carrying out some pilots and carrying out some work with heat pump, and Paul might want to touch on that in more respect to the so be quite on. But this is about creating a moving structure where we do the work that's required.
Thank you. And it is really, really important that really important work we're doing. So, any questions or comments from Cabinet colleagues? No? Councillor Galvin, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. It's obviously really good to get these forward into use. It's important and, well, more than important, it's absolutely essential.
Yeah.
But when you have an empty house and no disruption to new tenants, who can have a fresh start with a new system, does it not make sense to work, as the Climate Change Committee and many, many other experts have recommended, to grasp each and every window of opportunity from now on to get renewables into our stock? The evidence has moved on. Everyone in the sector knows if you've got a choice between insulation and a heat pump, you choose a heat pump. You get it in there and you get the insulation in as well, I do, because more than 3 times as much energy is created. You get one unit in, 3 out, rather than 1 in, 1 out. It's a no-brainer. So I would like to ask, how can we justify letting a major contract of well over £500,000 today to transform houses, which then fits them with obsolete, polluting, extremely expensive to run gas boilers? Tenants could be exemplars for their street, as well as enjoying warmer homes. And why was the chance not taken to install renewable technologies such as air source and solar at this time now? It's now we need to do things, not in the future. There won't be a future if we don't do things now. And can we absolutely guarantee that the chance won't be missed again?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jones.
I think we're looking at 40 voids, so that I want to get back into use and get people into those houses. That is my number one priority right now, is people. We have 4,000 people on our homeless register in the city, or on our housing register. Number one, that's my priority. Number two, I want to see as much use of renewable options as we can. I'm sure there are nuances to this that I'm sure Brian can go into, which he was talking me through, around where it's appropriate to use different technologies. I'm not fully up to speed with all of those right now. But I think my number one priority is I want to get this contract out and I want to get people into those 40 homes. Brian, do you want to go into the technical detail more?
No, I think it sounds like a cool look. I think, kind of like Karen Brian's point, I think it's about finding the right solutions that fit in those right policies. And absolutely, we can get in and avoid the gas boiler, we will do. But we've got a lot of properties still that don't have gas, and they've got storage heaters, things that are more polluting. So, well, we've got an opportunity to look at things like panel heaters, swapping out an air source heat pump cylinders in, so the hot water will always be delivered by a heat pump. We will do that if we can. We've got some pilot properties that are testing systems from Ariston at the moment, so we'll keep you updated.
Thank you. So the recommendation is on page 67. Everyone see that? So all those in favour? Thank you. So moving on now to item 9, which is on page 75, and it's Councillor Jones again. This is award of stock condition survey contract.
Thank you. So this report relates, as you said, to the proposed award of contract for stock condition survey for housing properties, recommending that the award contract this for the stock condition surveys to Fairthorne Farrelton's LLP at a cost of 500. I hate when I try to say those numbers. £599,250. Contract will be effective for 1 year starting from September 29th this year, and survey will include both stock condition surveys and valuation of fire reinstatement. And approval of requirement of 450,000 from the major and minor repairs budget to fund these surveys. To maintain our housing properties in good condition, it's essential for us to conduct detailed internal and external stock condition surveys. These surveys help us to assess the age condition of each building element and ensure that our homes meet safety standards and well maintained. They're crucial to developing our stock investment programme for the next 10 years and beyond. The scope of this contract will include surveys of the general structure of the properties, including internal and external areas, external inspections of roof, rainwater goods, walls, windows, doors, fences, hard standing, access paths, internal inspection of baths, bathrooms, kitchens, heating systems, electrics, insulation. Crucially, identification of damp and mould issues, fire reinstatement valuations. So I would like to recommend we approve this. I think it's, in terms of understanding, we talk a lot about building new houses, and that's great, but we've got to keep our current stock to the best possible standard. And if we don't know what's going on in them all, we can't do that. And we can't plan effectively and plan our budgets going forward. So I think to have the best quality housing that people in the city deserve, having this inspection, understanding what our baseline is really, really crucial going forward. So I hope I can have everyone's support in this.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Are there any comments or questions from Cabinet colleagues? No, I mean, it's a really, really important piece of work that we need to do to establish the condition, the baseline, so that we can then do further amelioratory work. So I'm really, really supportive of this. Councillor Galvin, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I do. Yeah, it's very good to see this happening. And as it makes no sense to then go back and do the same thing for retrofit, I'm glad we've been assured that the heat loss calculations and thermal efficiency are part of this stock condition survey, as that robust data is going to be so vital to decarbonise our homes, as well as making our tenants warmer and better off. But I would like to ask how exactly the process will identify which properties in which order will be tackled for retrofitting. Is there a decision model? Is it tested against the information that's being collected? So what are the decision criteria? What kind of model will be used? And will it centre on fuel poverty? Will it centre on value for money? Will it centre on decarbonisation potential? And how and when will those assessments be made? And how you're preparing for it? Is the model ready? And if not, when will it be ready?
Which question would you like me to answer?
Is there a model ready and can I see it?
2 questions, but I will find out and I'll get back to you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. So we've got a recommendation on page 75. Everybody see that? All those in favour? Thank you, it's passed. Thank you very much, and thank you to the officers as well. So now we move on to item 10, which is, so it's in 2 parts because there's a below the line section, but we'll begin the above the line part now. Councillor Kendrick.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, thank you, Councillor Jones, for reading now. This report represents the start of financial year 24-25 budget process and also extends the medium-term financial planning horizons to up to financial year 28-29. Since we sent the budget in February of this year, the economic turbulence has continued, as you might notice, with inflation stubbornly high and base rate continuing to rise to levels not seen since before the banking crisis in 2009. This is the backdrop to a budget setting for next year, which will again be difficult, given that we also seem to be plagued by short-term funding allocations and uncertainty from the government. There are significant challenges depicting the inflationary pressures that we will face, as well as responding to the demands for essential services such as housing. The level of government grant we will receive, as well as key components such as whether the funding guarantee will continue in financial year 24-25, are all uncertainties which we will have to contend with. It is essential that we plan for an uncertain future based on the best information we have available, and this report identifies the extent to which we believe we have closed the budget gaps over the medium term. Nonetheless, if we are to remain financially sustainable, it's essential that we meet these challenges head on, with the objective of balancing our medium-term financial plans without recourse to reserves. The work that we did last year to identify saving options for financial year 26-27 has put us in a strong position for this budget process. Although the estimated budget gap was initially set at 8.2 million. Once we have taken into account those same proposals already agreed, this forms to around 3 million. This is a strong position for this council to be entering a new budget process, and I have no doubt that collectively we will once again deliver a balanced budget for Norwich City Council residents. And this, of course, is the time when we read so many other local authorities are in severe financial difficulties. And I'd obviously like to thank Neville and his team for the very good work they have done in regard to our budget position.
Thank you, Councillor Kendrick. Yes, a lot of other local authorities are in dire straits at the moment, aren't they? And I'm reminded of what the leader of Barking and Dagenham said to us when he came for the peer review earlier this year and looked at our financial position and said many other councils would kill to be in the position that you are. That hasn't happened by accident. It's happened because we've had 10 or 12 years of really high quality financial planning and also transformation, and that continues with the current team. Would officers care to add anything?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions from Cabinet colleagues? We've all been thoroughly briefed on this previously, yeah, Adam.
I was going to ask about the section 31 windfall, as it were. How much is it, and has it all been allocated to the budget risk reserve?
It's £2.8 million, and no decisions being made yet. We'll be dealing with that at the first quarterly budget monitoring process report.
Thank you. So we have a below the line section, which we'll come to in a moment, but in terms of the recommendations on page 3 of the supplementary agenda, there's 4 of them. Oh, I'm sorry, Lucy. I'm sorry. I completely forgot you were there. Sorry. I'm just keen to get below the line. That's what it is.
Yes, so I think my questions are right for but it's about savings identified and validated through the design authority.
Yeah.
And I understand that there was an assumption around City Hall of £1 million for 25-26 been taken out, but the work wasn't developed enough to put it in. And I understand from briefings that the aim is moving towards, and what's always been the aim, to make the budget work over more than 1 year. So I want to ask about that City Hall £1 million. Can you tell me a bit more about that work and why it hasn't been developed and when it will be developed?
Yes, okay. Yeah, we think Nev probably is best to for that to land with.
Yeah, so it was one of the initial proposals that came forward last year, and as we've gone through the validation process through the design authority, I think we touched on that at recent briefings. From my perspective, the risk of including it was just too great at this point in time. There is work that's going on. We've commissioned some specific additional work already to start developing the thinking around what the proposals might look like. So it's not pushed into the long grass. We're progressing with that, and as soon as I'm confident that we've got a reasonable projection of what the additional costs and income might be, then I'll start to put those into the budget process.
The following year?
Well, it really depends on again, the time. It was in 25-26, which gave a bit of lead-in time. Once we know what the proposals are, we'll have a much better idea of whether it could be sooner or whether to push it out later. But the key thing is that once it starts to crystallise what the election numbers are, and to be brought in over the MTFS period.
Thank you. Paul, you wanted to come in.
I just want to add that I think we're just being cautious, and that's an approach I fully support. It doesn't mean that work will not proceed in terms of trying to get some action involved in City Hall. So it's just a mark, just a caution that we take in regards to the budget process.
I think that's a fair point. And of course, we are in a relatively good position, but the challenges are enormous, as you can see from the figures in the paper. So we're definitely not complacent. So going to page 3 of the supplementary agenda, there are 4 recommendations. Can we agree those? Those in favour? Thank you very much. So we now get to item 11, which is the exclusion of the public, which I think we have to vote on. Have we got any members of the public here? Oh, online, yes. So we need to vote for the recommendation, do we, to exclude the public?
Yes.
Yes.